Welcome to the Lovers Lounge podcast, where we talk to experts and other guests on topics related to love, relationships, and sex. I am your host, Tina Love, and on this episode, I am talking to writer, speaker, and activist Zachary Zane, love the name, that focuses on lifestyle, sexuality, culture, and entertainment. Zach, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. So you are talking to me all the way from California, right?
No, I'm actually in New York now.
Oh, you're in New York now. Oh my gosh. But you are
hmm
from California, but you're in New York now. Is that right?
Well, I've lived in New York for a couple of years, but I was originally born and raised in Los Angeles.
Wow. Okay. So, my goodness. All right. Well, now, and you recently, during the Obama administration, you actually were invited to a meeting there discussing a briefing on bisexuality and that kind of thing. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, sure. So it was part of this larger LGBTQ initiative, but specifically, it was looking at specific problems that plague the bisexual community. So they specifically brought in, bisexual activists and writers and speakers and physicians to kind of see if we could come together and start addressing some of these issues.
Okay. All right. And I've read a lot of your articles. That's how I learned about the meeting and everything and your participation in that. And I guess I ran across you on a show or something, and you were talking about your being bisexual, and I thought you would be a wonderful guest to talk to in the Lovers Lounge to kind of educate the listeners on bisexuality and just your life. I mean, how you kind of move through that and everything. So, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So, as we've said, you are bisexual, and or is it referred to as queer also? And can you kind of tell me, or just clarify for the listeners what this is?
Sure. So for me, bisexual just means I'm attracted to all genders. So I'm attracted to men, women, people who don't identify as either a man or a woman. And yeah, that's what it means. I'm really just attracted to everyone.
Okay. And therefore, I've heard, it's LGBTQ, the B, of course, being the bisexual part, and then Q being queer. So that's something you take either one of those. Is that right? Bisexual, queer?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think queer is often used as this umbrella term, especially now as there's so many labels within the within the LGBTQ community.
Okay.
I think the full acronym right now is like
Oh, yeah.
LGBTQQIAAP. Like, and I'm
Right.
not even making this up.
Right. I
So
know.
it's kind of a word that we have to kind of unify everyone, and for me, and to kind of be more inclusive, because often the word that was used was just like, oh, gay men, gay woman, gay this, but kind of queer is inclusive towards bisexual and other letters of that alphabet as well.
Yeah. Okay. So, like, when did you know that you were bisexual? I mean, was it that you knew that you were gay first, and then you also knew then that you were also attracted to women, and how did that happen for you?
Yeah, so it took me a while to figure it out, which I think is pretty common for bisexual men, especially, and I'm a little bit older, but like growing up, I thought I was straight and I was attracted to women, and I've dated women and I loved women, and I've had women break my hearts in high school and in college where I would be crying for days afterwards. But there was always kind of this inkling where thought I potentially could be attracted to men, and I definitely have some more effeminate mannerisms. So there was always like speculation that I was gay, but I just wasn't quite sure. The thing is, I didn't think bisexuality existed in men.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually had a therapist in high school when I told him, I'm like, hey, I think I might be gay. And he goes, well, do you like women? I go, yes. He goes, then you're not gay. I'm like, well, what if I'm bisexual? He goes, that doesn't exist in men.
Hmm.
So I actually it was a psychiatrist say this to me. Um, and obviously that kind of messes you up a little bit and
Right.
you start believing it. But then I got to college and I decided, you know what, I'm going to experiment with a guy. It's something I've been interested in, and now no one knows me here. I can kind of do it anonymously. And I did. And I kind of hooked up with this man my freshman year. And I expected to have this big, like, aha moment where, like, I would kiss his lips and immediately I'd be like, oh, I am gay 100%. Like, all my other relationships
Right.
weren't like this. And I had this intense attraction. And that didn't happen. I kind of enjoyed it, but to get to the point where I felt comfortable doing anything sexual with him, I drank so much that
Wow.
I blacked out and I vomited. Like I just had to get to that point. But the next day I'm like, huh, I don't really know. I was kind of more confused. I was like, you know what? Maybe that wasn't a good experience. It didn't seem like I really was that into it.
Yeah.
I don't think this is for me. But then I kept still these attractions didn't go away, and I found myself I'd only have the courage to kind of do this when I was very drunk.
Mm-hmm.
But during this time, I was dating women, I was in love with women, I had girlfriends seriously. I wouldn't be cheating on them, but I mean, in the time period that I wasn't with them,
Right.
um, and the thing I was just so confused. At times I would think I was gay, and at times I think I was straight. And then what didn't help was every single man I went to Vassar College, which is a very, we'll say, queer friendly school. It has a lot of just gay and bisexual people there.
Uh-huh.
Um, but every guy I know who identified as bisexual in college came out as gay shortly after.
Okay.
So I'd only seen it used as the stepping stone. I just didn't know any other men who identified as bisexual. And there were like famous gay men in the media. There were no famous bisexual men in the media. And when I remember trying to Google this, maybe 15 years ago or 12, 13 years ago, whatever it was, you would Google bisexual men, and the only thing that would come up was about bisexual men and HIV,
Yeah.
which obviously is just terrifying, but there was no actually, how do you know if you are bisexual? What does it mean to be bisexual? All this stuff. So there was just such little visibility about
Information.
bisexuality.
Right.
So few men identified as bi. I was told by a healthcare professional
That there was no
bisexuality
such
doesn't
thing.
exist.
Yeah.
And so I just did not know.
Right.
And so I kind of would keep on getting drunk and hooking up with guys. Then I date women. And then after college, I moved to Boston for work. And I decided to see a therapist. And kind of on my second session, I'm talking to him. I'm like, I'm so confused. And I like prepared kind of my monologue that I've told myself many times about my attractions to both. And he kind of cuts me off. He goes, Zach, I don't mean to be rude or to call you something, but it just seems very clear to me that you're bisexual. And I told him, I go, I'm like, that doesn't exist in men. And he replied to me, Zach, you're too smart to think that.
Right.
And so it was the first time, like, I was almost like granted permission to be allowed to be bisexual and heard from someone that, of course, this exists. And of course, that's what you are. And from that, I was able to actually start like dating men and feel more comfortable because at that time, still even though I was attracted to men, I would never. I at least I was kind of lying to myself, and I was like, oh, I don't think I could ever love
Right.
a man, even though I could. And since then, it's been great. And now I still have male partners, I have female partners. I'm very comfortable about my sexuality, and we're seeing there's so much more. And a part of it, this is why I'm so passionate and driven about what I do, and why I think it's so important to write about bisexual visibility
Yeah.
in this way to let you know that you're not alone. And now, if you Google, bisexual man or bisexuality or bi guy, there's so many more articles online. There's so many things written about it. There's so many people proudly identifying as it
Right. Right.
and there's just so much more visibility now, which is amazing. But
Yeah.
yeah, but anyway, it took me some time.
Yeah. And I can just imagine. So, all that time, then, probably subconsciously, you were almost kind of fighting against yourself, I think, or it sounds like anyway, because you were told
It,
that
it
this didn't exist. And so you're like, well, if it doesn't exist, then there's something wrong with what like it doesn't exist. So I shouldn't, So I can just imagine probably that played into the alcohol and why you felt like you needed to just kind of drink, because then it would take you out of the reality of the fact that, this therapist has told you it doesn't exist.
Yeah, and the thing is, and like one of the things when we went to the White House, you're like, what is it that these bisexual people are discussing? And if you look at the research, bisexual have equal, if not higher rates of anxiety,
Yeah.
higher rates of depression, higher rates of suicide, higher rates of self-harm, higher rates of like receiving domestic violence because of jealous partners. Like bisexual people are actually at like a very high risk for a lot of negative and bad things. And a part of what comes from that is A, being told you don't exist. That affects you.
Right.
But B, often not feeling welcome in either the gay community or the straight community.
Wow.
So at least when you're gay, you feel like, okay, well, at least there's this community I can be a part of. But often when you're bisexual, you'll feel like maybe you're hiding a certain part of your identity when you're with this one group of people and you can't actually be your full, real, and authentic self.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it definitely poses some unique challenges that other members of the LGBT community don't necessarily face.
Yeah. This kind of makes me think about today. I was looking at, I think it's The Talk. That's the one with Cheryl Underwood and Eve. Yeah. Anyway, they were talking about a book that has come out. Whitney Houston's. It's come to find out she had a lover, Robin.
Hmm.
She wrote a book, and they were just kind of talking about the fact that I guess during the book, Whitney supposedly ended the relationship with Robin and told her that she just really couldn't continue because it was going to be hard for her, in her career and everything. It would be too hard for her, and she would never be able to, grow professionally in her career. So she had to end the relationship. And, they were just talking around the table about how sad it is that, Whitney probably had gone for so many years, possibly being attracted to both women and men, but never wanting to admit that or come out with that publicly because of, perhaps the scrutiny or, whatever it was that she felt she would experience. And so she kind of, kept it undercover. And look at all the things that have happened to her with drugs and alcohol and all of that. I mean, it just kind of made me think about it as you were talking about, the you know the struggle anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So when you meet a woman or a man, do you immediately tell them that you are bisexual, or is this kind of a hard talk to have, or how do you handle this?
It it's very lucky that I now live in Brooklyn. I live in New York, and I
Mhm.
created a life for myself where um I kind of was known as the bi guy for so long. So I don't even necessarily have to come out as the first thing, but when we talk about work and I talk about, you know, on right for the LGBTQ community and I'm on a date with a woman, it kind of naturally comes up. But it definitely poses many challenges in terms of dating, specifically dating women. I think it's more difficult than dating men. Um, but again, I'm very lucky that I live in New York in a place where there are like actual bisexual communities. But when dating women, I've had many women just I bring it up and they just don't want to date me,
Yeah.
and they just say it point blank. Or if they don't say it point blank, I'll get ghosted, let's say, and I
Wow.
know that's the reason why, and that's very clear.
Yeah.
And I think they're not necessarily knowledgeable about it, or they think like, oh, he's actually gay and I'm not secure in myself, and I think he's going to leave me for a man, if we were to date.
Yeah.
Um, and I think, yeah, dating can be absolutely a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Um, and it's why many people just don't bring it up. I feel like bi people don't bring it up, and either they live like if they find themselves more attracted to men, they'll probably just say they're gay, and if they find themselves more attracted to women, they'll probably just say they're straight. I feel like that happens a lot of the time, just because it makes it kind of makes your life easier. But no, it's very difficult. And sometimes if you come out as bisexual too quickly, it can kind of like, because oftentimes I present very gay. People think, naturally, if you meet me, you'll probably think I'm gay. But like, so if I'm like, say, talking to a girl and I want to be like, oh no, I'm bi, it kind of makes it seem like, oh, I'm bringing this up because I want to sleep with. It comes off very
Yeah,
aggressively.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so it definitely can be tough. I mean, dating apps are kind of great because you can put it on your profile
Right.
and you get a lot. I've noticed I get a lot less swipes, a lot less swipe rights or whatever when I put I'm bisexual. Um, but also when you do that, you find yourself connecting more with other bisexual women and other bisexual men.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
you definitely get less people swiping right or whatever, but also obviously there's so many options on dating apps that's actually really nice, and you kind of can put it out there so people automatically know,
Right.
and you don't have to feel like, oh God, when should I tell them? When should I let them know, and how are they going to respond? They kind of know from the beginning, and if they're
Right.
interested, then they can go on a date with you.
Yeah, it eliminates that whole awkwardness of the conversation, having to bring it up. At least, if they've seen that already, then they know what they're getting into. They know what you like and what you don't like. And so then they're okay. And if they're interested, they will say something. If they're not, then they won't. It
Exactly.
Yeah, it kind of makes me think of just listening to the challenge with that makes me think about a show. I don't know if you've heard about this also, but there's a show called Love Is Blind, and there was a gentleman.
Oh, the
Yeah,
Carlton, yeah,
yeah,
the Carlton Diamond drama. Yeah, I actually wrote
yes.
about that a little
Oh,
bit.
you did? Okay, I didn't see that article, but at any rate, yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So he, well, I'll let you tell about it because you're the expert. Tell about that, kind of what happened with that since you wrote the
Well,
article.
sure. Well, the show itself, you kind of have to explain the premise of the show,
Yeah.
where you're speaking. It's people who don't know each other. It's this blind dating scenario and setup, and you're getting to know someone in pods, so you can only hear their voice and you can't see them. And then the men actually propose to the women
Right.
without ever having seen them in real life. At that point, they get to see them. They get to, and then they have a month together before they plan their wedding. Or before they get, excuse me, while planning their wedding, when they get married.
Right.
And what happened was one of those men, Carlton, Wall, did not tell um, his now fiance Diamond that he was bisexual. So all the time that he was in the pod and they're having these conversations, he didn't say anything.
Yeah.
Then he proposed in the pod. She said yes.
Right.
Um, and then after meeting, he kind of was acting kind of very different than how he was in the pod. And in these kind of confessionals and these cutaways to the cameras, he was just like, I'm bisexual. And I'm very nervous about telling her because when I've told people in the past, they've really rejected me. And it's been very painful.
Right.
Um, but kind of what happened, and it really was a sad situation. So he like ended up telling her, but he was already so defensive and
Yeah.
like on the attack that when he did, so she was caught a little bit off guard and she was like, yeah, I need some time to think. I have some questions.
Right.
And she seemed open to discussing it with him. But rightfully, she said, I feel like I was somewhat lied to,
Yeah.
because she was somewhat lied to, and I understand this man's nervousness and this apprehension, but you do have to let them know at some point. And he was just he already, I think, had this internalized biphobia and was clearly not comfortable with his sexuality because he just immediately jumped on her, just being like, well, you don't get it. You're rejecting me. You wouldn't have liked me if I told you this sooner. You suck. I think he called her a bitch
Oh
and all this
yeah, he
stuff.
did. Yeah, he did.
Um, and so he just he clearly was not accepting of who he was, and because of that, he was so defensive and so aggressive to her, and she was just like, "Well, I'm out of here. I'm
Yeah.
not dealing with this." But
Yeah.
it's a shame because he took it as, oh, she was not accepting my bisexuality, which I don't even think was happening. He was not even giving her an opportunity.
Right. I think she was trying
Um,
to process it and just kind of, process it. I think she also wanted to ask him some questions. And then I think she was going to make the decision as to whether or not this was something that, she could go for. But I think, like you were saying, his reaction and the way he was so defensive, I think that's what kind of blew it.
Yeah, and he was just clearly very not comfortable with this, and I think a little bit traumatized from his um the negative responses he had received in the past, and was just automatically assuming that he would get it. So he just kind of popped off so quickly, and it was just watching it, it was just really heartbreaking
It
because
was.
I could see what was going on. I could see what I felt for him. I felt bad that he had kind of lived his life, a lot of it was shame and confusion and being closeted and has been rejected. But then I also felt bad for her because he's now putting all of this rejection on to her and being negative toward, like, no one won from that. No one, like, it was just really crummy
Right.
seeing how everyone got hurt from that
Yeah,
situation.
it really was. It really was. So the other thing that as I'm listening to you, and I wanted to ask you the question about, how, because that reminded me of the show and, how you kind of move through that. And there are some other things like stereotypes that are commonly believed about bisexuals. Can you talk about some of that?
Sure. I mean, I think they're a little bit different for men and women, but for men specifically, it's this one of the big ones is that, oh, he's secretly gay, or he's using it as a stepping stone to becoming gay. There's also this idea that bisexual men will always be cheaters and that they'll never be satisfied with just one man or just one woman. So if they're dating a woman, they'll sleep with men. If they're dating a man, they'll sleep with women. There's this idea that they're like greedy or they're confused,
Okay.
or that they spread, HIV and other STIs. But really, none of these things are necessarily inherent part of bisexuality. And you have plenty of bisexual people who are in happily monogamous relationships and they don't cheat and they love their wives or they love their husbands, and that's that. And then you have other people who maybe do need to be with multiple people of multiple genders, and they are maybe polyamorous or in an open relationship because that's something that they want in their lives. But I think what it comes down to, a lot of it is trusting kind of what they say. So I'm someone who is, I'm always been like polyamorous or in an open relationship since
Mm-hmm.
my early 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I make that very clear. So in a way, I kind of embody some of these stereotypes where, oh, I don't think I'd be happy with one person of one gender. And that's actually fine because I'm being honest about it to my partners. I would never cheat on a partner. I would
Right.
never lie to a partner. I would never do those things. I'm very honest about what I need. The same way, you kind of have to take a bisexual man who's dating a woman, just being like, oh, if I'm happy being with you, I am going to be with you. I'm not going to cheat on you with a man. Um, yeah, sorry, I started rambling a little bit, so I'll just stop there
That's
and I'll let
okay.
you
That's
ask
all right.
your
Well, I was going to
question.
go because my next question was going to be, since you mentioned being polyamorous, um, now that is, I'd like you to define that first of all, too, for the listeners, just to make sure they're clear. And then also the type of conversation then that you have to have in that. I mean, that's all about, coming up with guidelines for that relationship, that polyamorous relationship. And so, how does that work?
Yeah, so polyamory, I define it as being able to love multiple people at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So, as opposed to an open relationship, which usually means like you have a, let's say, a wife or a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and then you maybe sleep with other people casually. With a polyamorous relationship, you might have a wife and a boyfriend and a girlfriend, or like being going out on dates and actually in love and committed relationships with multiple people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I say, I'm polyamorous right now, even though I'm currently single. And people are like, well, how can you claim you're polyamorous? And it's because even though I'm single, I want to let my partner know that even if I love them and I'm dating them, I'm open to the idea of loving multiple people at once. And if that happens, I would like to do that.
Okay.
But right now, no, I'm currently single,
Okay.
and not. I'm just kind of casually dating people.
Yeah. Something else, because I've been taking a look at your articles, and you had an article about being in a throuple. So, can
Yes,
you tell, like, what is a throuple? And well, you said you're
throuple.
single right now. You're not in a throuple right now.
Well, no, I think maybe I'm in a casual throuple, let's
Okay. Okay. Okay.
say.
Okay.
But no, a throuple just means you're in like a three-person couple, so you're kind of dating two people at once, and they're dating each other as well.
Okay.
Um, and you can have closed thruples, which would mean, let's say I'm dating these two people, and we don't sleep and we don't date with anyone else. It's just the two people. You could have an open throuple where you are committed to these two people, but then you're just casually sleeping with other people. And then you could have a polyamorous throuple
Wow.
where you're, dating, committed to these two people, and then you could also be committed and dating other people as well. Although at some point you're just going to run out of time if you keep if you keep doing that. So
Right.
eventually you're going to have to stop
Pretty
with
busy.
a certain number of partners at some point there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what are some of the challenges or issues then that come up with being in a throuple? Because I would think, wow, that's going to be kind of challenging. And
It's
I know you've written an article a little bit about this. So,
sure. There are definitely challenges and their benefits, like everything. It's I think what one of the big ones, obviously, and I think what people ask the most is like, oh, kind of jealousy if you end up getting closer with one person than the other. And I've heard of many thruples where that happens, and it ends up being that that couple breaks off, and that third person is left out. And I think that's a legitimate fear that you have, but also there's a fear of being broken up with in every single relationship. Almost half of marriages end in divorce. So it's like you can't predict the future in a way. So I don't like this idea of being like, oh, you're more at risk to be heartbroken. It's like, no, you're kind of always at risk to be heartbroken with anyone you date, no matter your relationship type or status.
right.
But it definitely can be difficult when two people end up becoming closer than the other person. But often, when you date long enough, it usually just goes back and forth. It depends on people's schedules. Someone gets a new job, and so they're not around as much. You end up being closer to that third person. That third person, um, if something happens to them, you end up being closer with the other person. So I think just over time, you end up being with both of them plenty. But yeah, jealousy is something that can happen. And honestly, I think that's the main issue. And I mean, the other issues would just be society judging you,
Hmm.
and feeling uncomfortable. Who do you bring home for Thanksgiving? How do you explain that to your family when you want to bring home both partners? And just if your family or friends are not accepting of you, or even your workplace, I feel like a lot of just the way society is it's built for couples. You always get a
Right.
plus one, not necessarily a plus
Plus two.
two
Yeah.
to an event.
Right.
And unless if you're going to like Disneyland or something, where I feel like they have a lot of those three-seater rides,
Yeah.
like um, really society is built for couples. So that can just be challenging as well.
Yeah. And you mentioned family and how your family responds. I mean, you have a pretty open family. Like I've heard other interviews with you on podcasts, and so I mean, your mother and your father seem to understand you pretty well. So, are they okay with you being in a throuple or a polyamorous relationship or all of that? So, how are they feeling about that?
It was interesting. When I came out as bisexual, they were completely fine with that, and they were not super surprised. And I think having seen me clearly heartbroken and attracted to women, but then also seeing how I could potentially like men, like they didn't for a question think I was gay. Like that was actually very clear
Mm-hmm.
to them, which was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
When I initially came out as polyamorous, um, I was dating a man who had a wife, and they lived together. And my mom was not thrilled. Her initial response, like she was a little taken back.
Yeah.
I think at first she kind of didn't think the relationship was could be ever serious. But the
Right.
reason why she was taken back was she was worried for the people involved. At first, she was worried that the wife was being left out and felt bad for her.
Mm-hmm.
Then she felt bad for me because she was like, I never want you to feel secondary, and you could never, get married to this person as well. That's also a challenge of being in a throuple. You can't be married to both two people. Um, but it just you always she was afraid that I would be
Yeah.
the other person, and never actually get my needs met and always be secondary. And she didn't want me to be secondary. And then she was like, I don't think three people could love, you could love two other people, equally. And I'm like, Mom, you have three sons here. So which one do you not love equally? And I kind of use that as an example.
Yeah.
I'm like, Mom, you have your two best friends that you always hang out with, and you have the same two women you've been hanging out with for 30 years. Like, I think you love them equally, and so that I was kind of able to disprove that very quickly. But then, yeah, the secondary, she was worried about that. And I think when she met him and met her and kind of see the way we interacted and see how happy we were and see how in love we all were, like it really it put kind of some of her worries to bed.
Yeah. Okay. So, being that you've been in relationships with men, women, which gender do you think? I know this is a hard one. Which gender do you think is maybe the harder to be in a relationship with? Like, what do you
Well,
seem to? Yeah, does it depend or what?
I mean, it depends, but also like the reason things are harder is not because of like that
The
specific
gender.
gender
Oh,
itself. It's because of the way society treats you.
okay.
Um, and so there are different challenges when I date a man versus date a woman. But like I'm trying to think here. It's sometimes as a man dating another man, we can kind of throw gender norms out the door. So there's kind of a level of equality, a level of kind of more equals, and we don't have this like script of like, well, I'm the man and you're the woman and you're supposed to behave this way and I'm supposed to behave this way.
Right.
And when I date women, we try to break that, obviously, because that's not something I want to have anyhow. But it's just kind of there's nothing kind of in place for one of the two men. So it's that, and then also like I have a lot of gay friends. I like going to gay spaces. When I bring a girlfriend to gay spaces, often, and like she's not treated with the love and respect that like she would be if I was dating another man, and also then dating a man going into straight spaces. So a lot of it just has to do with how kind of the societal challenges like get involved with it.
Right. And I think I remember hearing you talk about how, if you are dating a female, like she has to like you look at a lot of the RuPaul and the different shows like that, right?
Hmm.
Yes. So I thought I heard you talk about how, you kind of would like for her to be interested in that kind of stuff too. So I thought that was
Yeah,
interesting.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, and that's why often I end up dating like at this point of the women that I've dated, I feel like actually dated seriously have all been bi since I've come out. I still obviously sleep with straight women too, and they know I'm bi. But in terms of people I've been able to really have a connection with and really, call my girlfriend or date for at least many months,
Yeah.
they all, um, yeah, they've all been bi as
Yeah.
well. And I think that just makes it easier because they're a part of the LGBTQ community as well.
And probably a commonality between you two. I mean, there's just a comfort, a deeper comfort, I think, there because you both kind of relate and are on the same page and feel kind of the same way and attracted to the same thing, maybe. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. So now, did I hear that gay men are sort of put off by men being bisexual? Like they make a difference out of you or feel a
Um,
certain way. Did I hear you say that? Yeah.
not all gay men, but
Okay.
many do. And it's amazing how, I had a boyfriend for a while and I wasn't necessarily bringing around a lot of women. And it's like they know I'm bisexual, they're fine with it. And then when I do bring a woman about or I start talking about a woman, either they get uncomfortable or they're just like, oh, he's not actually. All of a sudden, I feel like I'm isolated. I'm not a part of this community. All of a sudden, I'm not a part of the struggle. I'm not part of all of this gay movement just because I'm also attracted to women. So some men do treat you differently and do make fun of you or not treat you the same way, which is a shame. But obviously, my gay friends do, and I've obviously plenty of straight friends too. And they treat like the ones who. What am I trying to say here? Sorry, I'm like rambling a little bit.
That's okay. But you do have.
Yeah, I guess. No, in short, yes, some do, and it's a pain in the ass. But those aren't the people that end up being my close friends.
Okay. And in your being in relationships with men, I want to ask about the top bottom sort of thing
Sure.
and your preference or who you are and how did you know? Did you just automatically know? I mean, is it consistent, I guess?
So I'm like versatile, which
Okay.
means I do both. Although I tend to end up being more top just because of my size.
Okay.
I'm like 6'4" and I'm a muscular guy, and a lot of people usually want that type of person who looks with that aesthetic to top. Um, but yeah, so I actually the way I learned, which is pretty funny, which is I learned to bottom from a woman I was dating.
Okay.
Um, she uh, she knew I was bisexual, and then when I said I'd tried bottoming once, I didn't really like it. She's like, oh no no no, I want you to try this, and we brought out these like dildos, and she was just really turned on like by doing anal play on me.
Okay.
So she was the one who brought the dildos out, brought the lube, taught me how to breathe, and got me to really relax and enjoy it.
Okay.
Um, but then it's just a matter of sometimes just trying it, and
Right.
I mean, and I really would look at tips online of how to bottom and how to prepare and how to clean out so you don't make a mess and which lubes to use and how to slowly warm yourself up and
Yeah.
breathe
Yeah.
and then use a ton more lube than you think you need to. But it's for all men have a prostate, which is why it feels so good. This prostate is this erogenous zone. It is this like pleasure center,
Yes.
and that has nothing to do with being gay or straight.
Right.
Um, it's something that every man can enjoy. But when it comes to kind of gay men topping and bottoming, it's just something you kind of try out, and some people just like doing one more than the other, and some people like doing both evenly and equally, so then they do that instead.
Right. I think there's a huge misconception that, you know, that because you are gay, that you're automatically going to like both, you know. But what I'm hearing from you is maybe not, maybe you just want to be this or that and not both.
Yeah, I mean, most people are not both, I'd
Okay.
say.
All right.
Most people tend to maybe they've topped a few times, maybe they've tried bottoming a few times, but most people definitely have a preference and end up sticking more to one than the other.
Right. Okay. Now, Zach, I plan to do a show real soon, and I'm looking for some guests. So maybe you can just let me know if you find somebody. But I'm looking for guests that are willing to talk about the fact that they may be in a marriage or a relationship, and they secretly get with or have sex with men, sort of what some people call the down low. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking for guests that will discuss that. So maybe I don't know if you do know of someone or you can direct me to somebody or tell them to give me a call. I'd like to have some people on the show to kind of talk about that. And of course they can be anonymous and all of that, but um I'd like to just kind of hear their side of, kind of why and how how they feel about this and all of that. I'd like to ask them some questions.
Yeah. I I mean,
Do you
I
ever
don't really
experience,
know.
yeah, do you ever experience someone who wants to be in a relationship or just wants to, make out, have sex, but they do this sort of on a sometimes basis sort of thing. They have a wife or somebody at home, girlfriend, but they kind of do this occasionally.
I mean, yeah, and I don't really support that. I think
Right.
that's very cowardly, and I
Yeah.
think you should be open and honest to your partner about what
Mm-hmm.
it is um, that you're doing. And, I think those guys honestly give open guys like me a bad rep and a bad rap. And I think a lot of people, these guys who are on the down low,
Right.
people now conflate me with that. And I think it's very frustrating
Right.
because I'm very honest and open about what I want.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So, Zach, one more question for you before I let you go. How do
Hmm.
you, being that you're bisexual in relationships with women and men, how do you protect yourself or your partners against HIV, AIDS, and that kind of thing? How do you protect yourself um, and the partner?
Hi, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yeah, so I mean, one thing is wearing condoms.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's a big one. Um, Getting tested
Yeah.
frequently is very important as well. Um, and then also you can kind of have things, they call it often like fluid bonding, which is when, uh, like I kind of had this with my boyfriend when I lived with him, where we wouldn't wear condoms, but we were to wear condoms with other people.
Okay.
And let's say I got drunk one night, I was in another city, I went out and I didn't use a condom with someone else. I would just tell him. And what we would do is we would wear condoms for 2 weeks and I'd get tested and make sure everything was okay. And then we'd go back to it. But also, so I'm on PrEP, which is pre exposure prophylaxis, which is a pill that you can take daily and it pretty much prevents you from getting HIV.
Oh, okay.
So HIV is not a risk that I have at all, and
Okay.
that my partners have at all. So that's really is I think the big fear for pretty much everyone. And then the rest of STIs, like they're like honestly, and I don't want to like it's not the end of the world. I've gotten gonorrhea before, and you go in and you get a shot, and you take pills, and you don't have sex for a week. You tell your partners, either they have or they don't. No matter what, they go in, they get treated. So really, the main issue is the stigma more so than anything else and the fear. But before I got gonorrhea, I thought it was the end of the world.
Hmm.
If I got this, and I was so embarrassed and ashamed. I wasn't trying to tell my partners. But you realize it's like it's more of a pain in the ass than anything else. So I think when you have I'm not saying go out and try to get it,
Right.
but
Right.
it's I know I'm not going to get HIV. I do my best to wear condoms. I don't lie when I make a mistake. I get tested a lot, and if something happens, and you deal with it, and
Right.
it's not the end of the world.
So, how long do you have to take? Did you say PrEP? PrEP?
Yeah, so it stands for pre-exposure prophylaxis.
Right. How long do you take it so that you can be protected?
No, so you just take it once a day.
Oh.
It's kind of like it's good to think about it like the birth control for gay men. It's
Oh,
kind of
okay.
a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
Um, and it takes you take it for like a week before, just so it's like it builds up enough in your system, and in that time you should still be wearing condoms. And then after that, you just take it every day.
Okay. How long has this been
And
out? Is this something fairly new medication, or how long has it
no,
been?
this has been FDA approved since 2012.
Okay. All right.
Um, and now, yeah, it's something that a lot of people, like most gay men, definitely know about
Know
it.
about, yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. So,
And in New York City, you see ads for it on buses and billboards and everywhere, and they're trying to get people to definitely be on this. But it really is this miracle drug.
yeah.
Yeah, that really has changed how I've been able to have sex more freely and without worry that I'm going to get this.
Yeah. So, Zach, how can you've been very, very informative, I tell you. Thank you so much for educating
Of
us.
course.
But how can people hear more from you or read your articles? Because they are so very interesting. You write very well.
Um, sure. So the best way is just to follow me on social media.
Okay.
And you can follow me at Zachary Zane underscore. So the underscore is at the end. Zachary Zane underscore on both Twitter and Instagram.
All right. Well, thank you so very much for coming on the show. Once again, you have definitely taught me a lot. And I know that my listeners probably have learned a lot as well. So I hope you guys, the listeners of the Lovers Lounge podcast, have learned a lot. And thank you so much for coming and hearing our show where we talk to experts and other guests on topics related to love, relationships, and sex. I am your host, Tina Love. And until next time, peace. And of course, don't forget love.